Hi, everyone. So my name's Tracy Spaight, and I'm the Director of Special Projects at Wargaming. I actually created the title because I figured it would be compatible with whatever I ended up doing at the company. And if there are any non-gamers in the audience today, well, Wargaming is most famous for World of Tanks and World of Warships and World of Warplanes. We are a leader in the free-to-play space, and we have about 150 million registered users. We're also passionate about history. It's part of the DNA of our company, and our development team goes to extraordinary lengths to try and capture the look and feel of the vehicles from the period. They climb all over them, the existing planes and tanks that survived, to take measurements of everything. They've done tours of all of the surviving battleships and carriers of the Second World War because it's important. We want to get it right. This is a screen grab from a National Geographic episode that was about our company and exactly how we get all these details right, including like revving up engines of tanks and driving them over various surfaces and recording all of that. So they kind of go to insane lengths with it. What might be less familiar to you is that as a company, we believe in giving back. And one of the ways we do this is by partnering with museums to create educational experiences, often using augmented reality and virtual reality. So over the last 5 years, we've partnered with museums around the world, including many here in the UK. Let's see, we have, this is the Bovington Tank Museum, where we have an education center. We sponsored the Fury exhibition there. I'll talk about what this is in a moment. We've recovered vehicles that were lost in bogs and rivers in Russia. And my favorite is the middle one here. Last year, we flew a whole bunch of World War II era planes from Great Falls, Montana to Moscow, over 10,000 miles of flights. It took a very long time in some very old DC-3s and AT-6 Texans. And that's because in World War II, the United States sent thousands of planes to Russia as part of the Lend-Lease Act, and not many people knew about it, so we did this project to draw attention to it. So you may be wondering, well, why does a video game company work with museums? I mean, after all, we usually work with pixels, not megatons of steel. And I guess firstly, it's because we actually really love military history. We want to make sure that the vehicles of World War II are preserved for future generations. And we want to tell all the stories of the people that drove them, flew them, or crewed the various ships. And secondly, well, museums are hugely popular. I had no idea until I went and started looking at the statistics, but apparently more than 500 million visits a year to all of the museums in the EU, and 850 million visits in the United States. And these are compiled from museum statistics groups. What that means is that more people are going to museums and going to all of the concerts, all of the major league sporting venues, and theme parks combined. So it was a pretty impressive number. And what we found is that there's a pretty good overlap between people that go to military history museums and like our games. I suppose if you're interested enough in World War II history to go and visit USS Intrepid, which is one of our partners, then maybe you'll like World of Warships. So that's part of our motivation for getting involved. And next, museums face pretty considerable challenges. They're struggling with how do they reach this new generation that grew up with social media and the internet and smartphones and so on. And author Mark Prensky has argued that they're bringing a different set of expectations about how they should be engaging with information and content, and museums are struggling to catch up and figure out how to reach them. But as a video game company, we know how to reach young people, and we know how to, what you would call, speak digital. So we bring our expertise in technology and dealing with younger audiences to try and help out museums. Another way we can help is that museums face a challenge with accessibility. For example, if you want to go and see the engine room of HMS Cavalier, you can't. Because it's full of asbestos and radioactive paint on the dials and really steep ladders, and there's tons of things you can hit your head on. So older visitors or people with more limited mobility simply can't get in there, and plus the safety hazards. But using VR 360 video, we can make them accessible. Oh, and one last point. Museums often don't have an in-house VR and AR tech group that could build this stuff for them, and a lot of museums are facing financial pressures in this era of budget cuts. So that's another place that we can come in and help. I'd like to talk with you now about some of the projects that we've been involved in over the last couple of years. In June of 2013, the RAF Museum, working with a group called SeaTech, recovered the only known Dornier 17 bomber from the bottom of the English Channel. It was off the coast of Kent in a place called Goodwin Sands, and it showed up in some side-scan radar of the site, and they discovered, hey, that's a Dornier. And there are none in any museums. All of them were destroyed in World War II, except for this one. The plane was shot down during the height of the Battle of Britain, and it's been called like the missing link of the Battle of Britain collection at the RAF Museum. So we got involved with the RAF Museum to create what we called the Wargaming Interpretation Zone. And it tells the story of the Dornier from its recovery to its conservation. And we brought this Dornier plane back to life by making a documentary video, full-scale illustrations, you can sort of see them on the wall back there, and also a augmented reality application. The monitors they're looking at actually show the hydration tunnels. When they brought the plane up, it was completely covered in rust and barnacles, and it smelled like fish, and it was horrible. But over the last 3 years, they've slowly conserved it, and now it's all shiny aluminum again. The other thing we did was create an augmented reality app, and this was our first attempt to do this a couple of years ago when the technology was not quite so developed. We worked with a group called Red Loop, which is based at the University of Middlesex, and we called it Apparitions. The app allows people to see the Dornier 17 bomber at geofence locations around the world. And if you can't get to the museum, effectively what we did is we brought the museum out into the world so that people could see it, because not everyone has the leisure or wherewithal to come to the UK to see it. And we put them over Trafalgar Square, which generated some interesting media buzz and complaints about, my grandfather would turn over in his grave if he saw Dorniers over them. Well, anyways. As part of this exhibit, though, we invited users of the app to send in the pictures they took of themselves at different locations around the world, and it was a way for people to get involved and feel engaged with the exhibit. So we got photos from as far away as Sydney and the Philippines and Mexico and other places. Now, another project we did, we partnered with Google, which was just launching Google Cardboard right at that time, and the Bovington Tank Museum, which is here in the UK, to create a series of 360 videos that we called Virtually Inside the Tank. So here you can see our team trying to wire up a tank with this big, GoPro ball, and we had to solve the challenge of how do you rumble along in a giant tank and keep it stable, but our guys solved that with bungee cords and various other things. So we made a series of 5 videos and put them out on Google Cardboard. And there's a fellow looking at it in Google Cardboard. Again, we solved an accessibility issue. And it's one of the unfortunate drawbacks, I guess, of the Tank Museum. They will not let you get inside of the tanks. You are not allowed to drive them, and you're not allowed to fire the main armament. So we solved this problem. They let us go out in it. 2 of my colleagues are actually former tank commanders, one in the UK Army and one in the US Army. So they know what they're doing, and they let them get in the tanks and drive them around and show people what's going on inside the tanks that are in our games. And then we got more ambitious. So we decided to recreate an entire tank battle that took place in 1941. It's an actual tank battle, and there are contact reports and all of that we could work from. And we shot it at the Stalin Line Museum, which is just outside of Minsk, using VR 360 cameras and a drone. The production featured more than 40 reenactors, 2 tanks, and anti-tank guns, and lots of explosions. So can we watch? So, next. We also worked with the HMS Cavalier, which is at the Chatham Dockyard Museum. We made a 360 video, again, with this C-class destroyer, which fought in the Battle of the North Atlantic. And as part of the film, we worked with BBC presenter and historian Dan Snow. You might know him from the Viking series and his series on castles and also World War II. One of the unfortunate things is this really cool drone we had decided to auto-land itself in the water during the production, so it didn't survive. But you know, one of the coolest parts of the ship is the engine room, and you can't even go in it because of all the ladders and other things that we did. So again, we were able to address an accessibility issue by using 360 film. So maybe we could watch that.
Okay, here we go, Richard, down in the very bottom of the ship here, the engine room. This is where the action happens. Steam created there, drives the turbines, drives the propellers, pushing this mighty 2,500-ton vessel across the surface of the waves.
And she was a fast old vessel down as well, wasn't she? Capable in excess of 33 knots, which is going some for any ship.
Yeah, but the guys down here, I mean, they created that speed, they made that happen, but it was a dangerous job. They're behind watertight compartments, they're right down. Look at these ladders, very narrow, confined spaces. You're not getting out. If a torpedo comes to the side or a bomb comes to the deck, you're going to struggle to escape. And lots of these stokers down here paid the ultimate price. Like at HMS Keith in 1940 off Dunkirk. Bomb came down the smokestack, blew up in the engine room, ship broke apart, and there were heavy casualties.
Okay. Last year marked the 100th anniversary of some of the battles from World War I. So as a company, we decided that we would get involved in celebrating these centuries. One of them was the Battle of Jutland. And it was fought over 36 hours from May 31st, 1916 until June 1st, 1916. And of the 250 ships that were involved in this engagement, there's only a single one that's left, and that's the HMS Caroline. Now, the National Museum of the Royal Navy, they had a problem because the Caroline is actually docked in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and the Portsmouth museum that's in Portsmouth, there's no way to get the ship there. It just won't move. It would sink if you were to try and do that. So what we did was bring the ship there virtually. More than that, though, we could return the ship to its World War I configuration, which wasn't possible in the restoration of the ship. But we could do that virtually. So last spring, our artists meticulously remodeled this ship from the original blueprints and photographs. And now, when you go to the National Museum of the Royal Navy, you can see the ship as it existed at that time. So we created an augmented reality experience. There's a big plinth when you walk into the main exhibit hall, and you can see the ship. So here it is. It's about 6 feet long, and it floats above this, this box that we built. And we have a couple of attached iPads, and visitors can walk around and see what she actually looked like at the time. Okay. We also worked with Belfast. So those of you visiting London, if you have some time, she is right on the Thames near London Bridge, and you can go check it out. She is a cruiser from the Second World War, and she was involved in sinking the German battle cruiser Scharnhorst. So we use VR 360 to explain how that battle happened and to get inside of spaces, again, that you're not normally allowed to go. So could we see that video?
We can see now the rounds going up, each of these individual hoists at a rate of around about 8 per minute. And the final destination, of course, the gun house. We're here now at the final destination, up in the gun house. And here we would have found the crew freezing, dressed in full flash kits for the full 2 days of the battle, grabbing sleep, of course, when and if they could.
The rum ration probably would have come in handy. But anyway, a round is delivered from the hoist down onto the loading trays. That is quite a heavy round, and because we've got to get it out again, we're moving to this lighter dummy. The gun is in the horizontal position for loading.
So what I'm going to do now is open the breech.
And I put the ramming tray, lock it into position.
I'm then going to push the projectile or the round as far up the barrel as I possibly can with my hand.
While a bag charge is retrieved from the charge hoist.
And we're then going to do the same with the bag charge.
Then you ram it. Of course, this would ordinarily be done in 7 seconds.
But they did have a much bigger crew than just the two of us.
Pull the loading tray out of the way.
I'm now going to close the breech, make sure it's fully closed and locked in position. And the final thing, just like in tank gunnery, Nick, we take our vent tube, introduce it into the vent tube chamber, make sure it's fully closed.
Elevate the gun back to firing position and fire.
can I say? Sometimes I really love my job. Okay, so the last example I'm going to talk about was the 100th anniversary last year, and that was at the Battle of the Somme, which saw the first deployment of the tank in combat. It was meant to break the stalemate on the Western Front. And what we decided to do is recreate the tanks virtually in an AR exhibit, but we also dragged an actual World War I tank out into Trafalgar Square, and we put it in the same exact place that the government had brought tanks in World War I to sell war bonds. So we put them in the same place. And here you can see it. Well, actually, it was the tank from the movie Steven Spielberg's War Horse. We couldn't get the little Willy out there because they thought it would break, so we took the replica. Now, Sir Winston Churchill was a big believer in the tank, and I think it was fitting that his grandson came and spoke at this event to talk about the importance of the tank for the evolution of warfare in the 20th century. And it's just not every day that you see a World War I tank trundling down the streets of London. So we literally had a crowd of like 1,000 people following this tank, including much of the world's media, which was great for us. And what we also did was we created a tank app. We called it Tank 100, which you could read about the history of the tank. You could watch our VR 360 videos of what the first tanks look like inside. And you could spawn your very own Mark IV tank and Mark I tank in your backyard to look at them. So, in conclusion, right on time, what you can do with AR and VR experiences is you can bring history alive and connect with the younger museums. So museums have found this very helpful. Make accessible areas of museums that are completely inaccessible, and bring the museum out into the world. We're able to showcase vehicles, how they looked in their original configuration when it's not possible to restore them to the way they looked in the past. And finally, to generate positive media stories, which are good for us and good for our partner museums. And just a word on that, we got stories in the BBC, Rolling Stone, Forbes, Digital Trends, VentureBeat, and many other publications. We got hundreds of millions of media impressions off most of these projects, I think. And that's all. So, thank you.